All right, welcome everybody. It is a third Wednesday of the month. That means it's time for the Kubernetes office hours, the live stream where we take your live questions about Kubernetes, and our panels of experts tries to get through as many of them as possible and help you out. Before we start, let's do some quick panel introductions. Bob, kick it off, please.
Hi, my name is Bob Killen. I am a research cloud administrator for the University of Michigan. Sort of my specialty is like Kubernetes on-prem, things like kubeadm, and some other interesting things like multi-cluster and federation.
Okay, my name is Chris. I'm an intermediate developer with the City of Ottawa. I'm the team lead for our container strategy as well as DevOps. And I'm a CKA, so my specialty is kind of jack of all trades right now, so anything kind of goes.
Joel, you're next.
Hi, I'm Joel. I work for Pusher in London. I'm a cloud engineer there. I maintain the Kubernetes infrastructure. I've done a lot of stuff with security in the past. At the moment, I'm doing lots of stuff around controllers and GitOps and that kind of stuff. So if you got any questions about like KeyBuilder and stuff, I've been working on that lately.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey Sika. I work with Bob at the University of Michigan, but I'm a research database administrator. And I do a lot with SigUI, so the dashboard. I've done a lot with batch jobs and Kube Batch, which is now Volcano. And I'm also kind of just a jack of all trades with what I've had to touch lately.
Hey, I'm Puya. I'm dev operations and product at GiantSwarm. I work mainly in security and designing operator systems, and have a lot of experience with clusters on AWS, Azure, and on-prem.
And Benedetto, you're last.
Oh, right. So, so yeah, my name is Benedetto. I'm Italian. I live in Luxembourg. I work for Sysdig. I've been working now 2 years on Kubernetes. I'm DevOps by title, a system administrator by history, and I'm new to this experience. So, well, I don't have much more to say.
Awesome. And I'm George Castro. I work at VMware on Kubernetes Upstream full-time as a community manager. So this entire panel are volunteers. So if you have Kubernetes knowledge and you don't know how to participate or how to get started, you're more than welcome to join this group of people. We meet once a month here and then just basically try to answer as many questions as we can. We have a lot of fun. We give away t-shirts. It'll be great. So let's explain how it goes. So before we start, we got some ground rules here. This is a judgment-free zone. So everyone had to start from somewhere. So please help out your buddy by being supportive in the channel of people. As always, the Kubernetes Code of Conduct is in effect. We'll do our best to answer your questions, but the panel doesn't have access to your cluster. So live debugging is pretty much off topic, but we will do our best to at least get you moving down to the next step, or how to turn on a certain debugging feature, or whatever it is you need to do to unblock you to hopefully get you to where you need to go. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on your answers with your experiences and pro tips. As always, production experience is highly, highly coveted. Audience, you can help us out by pasting URLs to the official docs, blogs, or anything that might be relevant to the topic at hand. So usually while the panelists are answering questions about a certain topic, feel free to just whack in blogs that you might have read about that subject or anything. We do have the chat live streaming here on the side, and what I'll do at the end is grab all those URLs and throw them in the YouTube description so that those of you watching the YouTube video will have a list of URLs that you can reference. So the more information we get from you, the more helpful this is to the community. I do have a thread going on discusskubernetes.io, which Bob will paste into the chat because that's what he always does. Feel free to have, if you have a pre-written Stack Overflow question or another question on the forums that isn't getting any love, please feel free to link that there or link it in the channel, and then we will get to it. We have a little queue of questions that we have, so if you're in the channel, start queuing them up. We'll put them in our little notes there, and we'll take them top to bottom as as best we can. You can also help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, and paying it forward. So we really love it, like when people use this as a work resource. If you're a team manager and have a bunch of Kubernetes folks, we love it when you show them this content, give us feedback, and let us know how we can help you by making this better. So panel, are we ready? Before we start, everyone whose question I do read on the air will be automatically entered in a competition to win a Kubernetes t-shirt, which I'm actually wearing today. I did this on purpose. You won't believe how hard it is to like wear the right shirt on the right day. So what we'll do is, as you ask questions, Jeff will keep track, and using his randomized scheduler thing that he wrote, I'm sure it's a custom 1D20, we'll pick who wins the t-shirts. And as always, a very special thanks to the CNCF for sponsoring the t-shirt giveaway. Before we start though, I would like to thank Giant Swarm, StockX, Packet, Pusher.com, Red Hat, Samsung SDS, Weaveworks, VMware, Zing, Huawei, the University of Michigan, and the City of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, for allowing their engineers to participate this as part of like their official thing and helping out the community. Your support is always appreciated. So those of you in chat, how do we sound? If you can give us a quick sound check, and then we will get started with our first question. Is from Alex. Thanks for coming, Alex. Says, if I want the whole pod to restart based on a liveness probe, wait, that's not a complete sentence. Okay, let me start over. If I want the whole pod to restart based on a liveness probe for one container, example is a sidecar that is setting environment variables that have gone stale. What is the correct way to do that? I'm having a hard time parsing this question.
I don't believe you actually can currently. I know there was some discussion on that, and I know, so there's also a KEP right now out about sidecar containers to sort of have the sidecars be like sort of cycle than the main containers that you're trying to monitor.
Mm-hmm. Chris mentioning I would use an operator for that, maybe, question mark?
Yeah, you could build something custom there, most probably, or you could just depend your other containers on a health check in that sidecar container. Like let them fail once fail their health check once the other health check fails, but that is very custom code, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Chris also mentions you could trigger a pod to rebuild on secret changes.
And if you're not, another thing, like there's a couple things like the console template and a few other tools that are sort of meant to act as like PID1 in a container. And if they detect a change, they will automatically restart at least the process underneath them. But that might be a bit more situational.
Okay, let me just see what people are typing here. Joel's added a link to the KEP.
Yeah, I think it's mainly around this like configuration reload. I think there is a huge thread still ongoing on like, can I reload a pod based on config map changes? What we do is we run a controller that versions the config and reloads everything based on changed config or secrets.
On Fia's point there about reloading config, we actually have a controller that does something similar, but it takes a hash of all the data in them and does like the Helm cut style trick and puts on the pod spec. If anyone is interested in that, I'll post the link.
Okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, we also use a hash. That's just hashing all the config is a good idea usually.
Okay, keep the questions coming. Any more comments or help on this one? There's Wave. All right, moving on to the next question. Hold on, I got signed out of the HackMD, so I'm not in the notes. Puya, you're leaving about halfway through, right? So, audience, I'd also like to know if you're attending KubeCon, if you could just answer in the in the chat, that would be great. That would be great. Okay, moving on. Matt, welcome, asks, is a Docker registry the best way to have a local image repo for Kubernetes to pull from?
I would put forward Harbor as an option for that.
Yes, me too.
Same, big +1 for Harbor.
And also, you kind of need a Docker registry, right? It doesn't work without one, does it? Unless you
you could locally store it on a computer or just a
Yeah.
server and just go but Harbor gives you the scanning, Helm registry, and auth. So it's quite robust. And the new version actually just came out, or is going to be out next week. And that's going to give you robot accounts, I think some webhooks and some other really nice stuff.
Yeah, there's some other integrations with other things in the community, like Dragonfly, and I forget the other tool that sort of distributes images amongst multiple hosts. So if you have to guarantee that images are on a bunch of hosts and spin up time is important, things like that can really ease that burden.
Mm-hmm. Can you just explain the Dragonfly thing real quick for people?
Think of it as like a system to a peer-to-peer system to distribute your images amongst your hosts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it can act as a pull-through registry too. I mean, most of these things, or some of these things, you can do with Docker distribution or Docker registry too, although you just don't get the added benefits of authorization on top, and you don't have like a chart registry integrated and a lot of these integrations. And it's usually pretty hard to run your own Docker registry. Harbor should be a bit easier to operate.
Okay, so keep the questions coming. We're actually having a hard time keeping track. That's always a good sign. Okay, so any other opinions on image registries at all?
Just some alternatives, like there's Artifactory. I know a few people are using that, which they really enjoy. So.
Okay, if you could toss a link for that in there as well, that'll give you the options. Okay, Matt, so I hope that helps you out. Harbor and Artifactory are two that should help get you started. And as always, if anyone has follow-up questions, just feel free to ask them. Sometimes we might read a question, have questions for you. And then while you're typing out more information, we'll go to another question and then come back to you. So if you want more detail when we answer a question, just let us know. All right, Mad Dev asks a question that is very dear to my heart, Bob. He says, hi there, has anyone used canonical Kubernetes? I have it set up, but I'm not quite sure how to use the Kube API load balancer to load balance requests to my workers. The doc says they expose the workers directly, but then that defeats the purpose of load balancing, doesn't it? I have this set up here from Juju Kubernetes, but I don't fully understand how the load balancer works since it's only exposed on 443 and not 80. Has anyone used this? So I've worked on this in the past at a previous job, but I have not touched this in a very long time. So fortunately, I am not able to answer this question. Anybody else want to take a stab at it?
I have not used it either, but in general, you wouldn't want to expose anything on 80 anyway. All traffic with Kubernetes, at least the API servers and everything, is going to be encrypted by default.
I do think the API load balancer there is made to stand in front of the API server and not in front of the workers. So the workers should be using that to connect to the API server and servers. And so you don't need to expose the workers for that, I think. But I don't know the canonical distribution that well. So I think it was used in the CKA exam, but did that a long time ago, so I don't really remember.
Yeah, so I do know some of the people that work on it, and I've invited Konstantinos to help you out, Mad Dev. So if you check the chat there, at K Jackal works on this, and I've asked him to help you out with CDK. They do have a channel on the Kubernetes Slack, which is
And some of the Ubuntu guys are also on Discuss.
Yeah, they are. So if you go on discuss.kubernetes.io, you will find, and here's Konstantinos. Hopefully he can point you to the right question. So I hope that answers your question. Feel free to type what's going on. And if not, hopefully Konstantinos can help you out. And if you're still having a problem, let me know and I will snag some of my ex-coworkers and make them help you. All right. Anything else with canonical? Have any of you guys used this at all? Or yeah, I'm in cube admin land now, so I've not touched it. But microcates is cool. It's related, but not the same thing, I don't think. Okay, we're skipping that question. Hamid asks, what are the current best practices to use Let's Encrypt SSL certificates with your Apache/PHP containers running in Kubernetes? There's a port conflict generally as both services use both port 80, and I can't find any documentation to automate the process of generating them since entry point of the PHP official images have hard set run Apache process in the foreground.
So I just posted a reply there suggesting maybe cert manager and an ingress controller in front of the Apache. I think the idea is basically when you use Let's Encrypt in a container, it needs to expose port 80 so that you can do the Acme challenge. But it's easier to just use something like cert manager, which will automate all of that and fetch the certificates and make sure they're up to date in a completely separate process away from your Apache.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I would maybe check if you still need the Apache if you're using a load balancer like an ingress controller that is already carries like an Nginx or HA proxy or Envoy, then you might not even need the Apache anymore.
Okay. Do we have any other tips?
I was going to say the same thing everyone else did.
Yeah. I mean, if you really want to terminate in the container and you don't want to terminate in front, like in the load balancer, you would be still able to maybe use cert manager or some Let's Encrypt controller to get the cert into a secret and then import it there. So you just don't run it in the same container, run it external, and then just pull in the secret into your container and mount it to your Apache. That should work.
Okay. All right, and we're down to 2 questions in our queue, so listeners, please feel free to ask more. Panel, you don't have to answer the questions so quickly. Nah, just kidding.
George,
Yeah.
are you using the right Zoom license?
Yeah, it should be. Why?
Because we're getting a countdown for the meeting to end.
8 minutes.
Okay, all right. I thought I fixed that. All right, so while you answer, I will figure that out. So it says, hi, is it possible to list all of the controllers in Kube Controller Manager and chain of admission controller in Kube API server with a kubectl client?
I'm totally blanking on the command, but I know there's at least one that I think will list like what features are enabled, and you can sort of map those to what's enabled.
Yeah, I think you can ask for feature gates and API versions, or one of them at least. But you won't be able to actually get like a list of controllers or the chain, like with order of admission controllers. I don't think that's.
Yeah.
The question is, why would you want that with kubectl as a client? And like, what is the use case maybe there?
So you can get the thing, stuff that's registered with API resources, kubectl API resources, and API versions.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but you wouldn't. It's kind of impossible to find the chain because it might change depending on the object that's being passed through and the attributes in it.
Okay, any other comments on this one? All right, I'm going to read one more, and then Jeff's going to take over reading while I sort out our Zoom issues. Does that sound like a good thing? So if the stream cuts out for like 30 seconds, we're on it. All right, if those of you in the channel, though, please feel free to continue to pay some questions. All right, so Jothi Manny, I hope I got that right, asks, is it really good to have multiple hops in the Kubernetes architecture, like browser to AWS ingress, to Nginx ingress, to pods? Though the AWS ingress to Nginx inside the network is the best way to achieve this, your thoughts and suggestions, please. PS Nginx ingress is used for custom header config.
Usually it's not a big problem. Like we run huge sites globally with that setup, and we have like, I don't know, 300,000 requests a second, and that holds up, and even higher maybe. If you run a lot of WebSockets, maybe you want to use like a cloud load balancer directly. But in general, for normal web scale loads, I don't think you'll run into a lot of issues as long as you've configured everything in a good way.
Yeah. You can also remove one additional hop. There is a setting you can set on the service, so that way, like, traffic will only go to the nodes that are running the instance of the pod that you're trying to get to. And I can pull that up in just a sec.
While Bob's doing that, do we have any other comments for that?
The setting is external traffic policy, and you set it to local,
Yep.
just to chip in there. And in terms of like this, what we have a similar thing, load balancer. We've then got Istio Ingress at the moment to our services, and that's all about, like, pusher products are about low latency, and we don't seem to have any issues with it. So yeah, it's not normally a bit much of a problem from our perspective as well.
Awesome. All right, with that, we have run out of, never mind. Someone had just posted in office hours. So Robbie Blaine asks, hey guys, I'm looking for a way that I can set annotation values on routes across an OKD cluster, specifically the HA proxy router OpenShift whitelist annotation. For example, I want to have all routes have the local office network, 192.168 Cedar, whitelisted, and then whitelist additional IPs and subnets as needed on individual routes.
I need to read this question.
Yeah. Who here has had experience running or working with OpenShift? That might be one place to start.
I think most of us are all straight upstream for the most part.
Same.
Not sure what that annotation is set on. Is it set on ingresses? Because it seems it's a load balancer HA proxy, right? So it might be the ingress controller and then your IP whitelisting. So the use case is to set the same whitelist for all of them, but have additional ones. I think you need to template that on your rollout, because you cannot have the same annotation twice in a Kubernetes resource, and it will not just merge that. So you would need to merge it in your templating. So have a default and add your additional ones, additional IPs and subnets, because usually the whitelist is a comma separated list. At least in other controllers, it's like that. So you would need to concatenate that in your templating, be that with Customize or Helm or any other templating engine you're using, and then apply those ingresses to your cluster like that.
Hopefully that at least gets Robbie going forward. All right, George has solved our Zoom problems. However, we all have to drop from this Zoom call and then hop on to a new one. So we're going to do that really quick, and we should be back relatively fast. So BRB.
I'm
There we go. There we go. Okay. Thank you for letting us know, Suresh, that we did not have audio. Now we have audio. So sorry about the technical details there, everybody. We are now all set, and we will continue. Please feel free to keep on typing. So next question comes from Ferret. Thanks for joining. It says, could you comment on Kubernetes' suitability for offering a PaaS-like service? Hundreds of thousands of pods. Each container requires unique attaching storage via CSI. High-level cluster turnover. New pods are getting deployed and pods are shutting down continuously. Priority on how quickly a given pod comes up and becomes routable. Need this to be under 15 to 20 seconds, 99% of the time for a trivial web application running inside the container. So any comments here? I'm going to pull up the notes from SigNode that had some scalability reports.
Yeah. I think the big thing is, and this is a terrible answer, but also the best answer is it really depends. Generally, it's better, like if you're going to be running like hundreds of thousands of pods, to have lots of clusters, and for multiple reasons, to sort of like have your various like failure domains and just not put a whack load of stress on like the API server and the backing, et cetera. There is a bunch of people that do this sort of thing. Let's see.
So I'm pasting in the quick presentation that SIG Scheduling put on for the community meeting last week.
Okay.
And they've been doing some work there on performance for 5,000 node clusters in particular. So that information is important, especially the last slide that says how you can contact them, because they're always looking for feedback. So I've got that for you. I've tossed that link in.
The big number to note is they have improved performance and scheduling to roughly 100 pods a second in a 5,000 node cluster.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on your pod churn, you're going to hit the upper limits of the scheduler, let alone et cetera.
The other thing is like startup time. That also depends on like how big your container images are. If they're tiny, and they're cached locally on the system, it should be pretty quick. But if it's having to pull down like a multi-gig image on multiple hosts, yeah, it'll probably be beyond the 15-20 second mark.
Mm-hmm.
There's also actually a really good blog post by, it was like the OpenAI folk on running large clusters, that has some of like the tunables on what you should look at and other metrics that you should look at when operating large clusters.
OpenAI, I've got it right here from January of this year. I will toss that into the chat. That looks like it's right. All right. Anything else? All right. Thanks for your question. Pavelazv, asks, what's the best approach on rotating Kubernetes control plane certificates? I assume they mean plane, not plan.
So it kind of, God, I hate saying it depends. If you have spun up your cluster using kubeadm and you tend to do version upgrades at least once every, like, say, 6 months, that should rotate the certs for you. But I'm sure Bob is going to pipe up and tell me I'm wrong in some way.
No, you're right. For once.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, essentially, with kubeadm, if you have a kubeadm provision cluster, anytime you do an upgrade to another version, it'll renew the certs. If you're managing it yourself, or it's going to be very dependent on sort of like what you're using to manage Kubernetes. GKE and all those fun things will just handle it all for you behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. What does COPS do? Do we know?
I think COPS uses kubeadm now.
Okay.
We use RKE for our clusters, and they just added a flag to rotate certs. So it's just a matter of -- rotate certs, and there you go. So
okay.
Yeah. So like Jeff said, it depends on how you have it installed. So KubeSpray might handle it different than everything else, and so on and so forth.
I want to say KubeSpray by now is very kubeadmin, right? Or am I mixing it up with?
Didn't mean to pick on KubeSpray. Just
no. I mean, I kind of want to cover what people are using, So if they're using a tool that doesn't support that, they should know. It says Kubespray supports kubeadmin for cluster creation since version 2.3 and has already deprecated non-kubeadmin deployment. So if you use Kubespray, you should be all set to go. That is good to know. Did we cover on him? And let's see. It looks like Ibrahim has some. Oh, that's just another question. So we'll get to his or hers here soon. Any other comments on rotating control plane certificates? Has anyone had this happen to them in exploration? Oh.
Yep.
I've read about them, but I've never met someone who's had to deal with this.
Bob's gonna rant.
I'm not gonna rant, but so we built our clusters when kubeadm was first a thing, and have upgraded them in place, and at some point, 2 out of all the certs that it manages weren't actually being upgraded, so I just had to go in and essentially delete them and redo them manually with the kubeadm command line to do it. It really didn't. It was honestly pretty painless. All our services remained up and running.
Yeah,
we just can create new things.
So he has a follow-up question that says, question on rotating those certificates. If they're on kubeadmin and they just want to rotate the certificates, would it have downtime?
You will have to, if it's using kubeadm and you rotate the certificates, you'll have to regen the configs that it's using to sort of talk to the API server, because every component gets its own sort of, credentials to talk to it. So you'll have to refresh that, and you should be able to do it live, but there will be brief downtime for each component.
Right, but the services being served should all still work, right? The kind of cruise control thing. So those of you that are newish, like I have, this is something I've learned from the senior people that kind of designed Kubernetes. Was the point is if the entire control plane, everything just blows up, your servers, your services, and whatever you have deployed kind of just go in cruise control mode. Even if your cluster is broken, they're at least serving traffic. So that's kind of like a meme I try to remember in my head. As far as it comes to downtime, though. So hopefully that answers your questions about rotating their certificates. And as always, you can ask about kubeadmin. There's actually a channel in Slack, SIG Cluster Lifecycle. And we also have a kubeadmin tag on discuss.kubernetes.io. And I know that team watches those questions just about every day. So if you have a follow-up question for your certificate rotation plans, please let us know how that works out.
kubeadm actually has their own channel specifically.
Oh, they do. Also, awesome. It is #kubeadmin.
Yep.
I will just put that in the channel. Okay. Anything else? All right. Ibrahim, welcome, asks, we will deploy Kubernetes on bare metal with kubeadmin. Also, we want to use our NetScaler load balancer appliance as well. We currently have some specific load balancer settings that we would like to use in the future, like SSL, etc. We looked at NetScaler-ingress, but found just simple settings that may not be enough for us. So we consider deploying a management app listening pod changes via the API server and using the REST API of NetScaler to configure it as we want it to be. What would you say about this architecture, ingress versus management app versus other thing? Slightly smiling face emoji.
It kind of sounds a lot like the current architecture for things like cloud provider, because I mean those are using separate objects to spin up things like an ALB or an ELB or whatever, but I mean it's the same principle. It's tried and true architecture so far. The only thing I might say is if you're going to build something like that, it might actually be more prudent to try and contribute and update the NetScaler ingress. Just because if you're going to go to the effort of building your own thing, there's already an existing thing that kind of is halfway there. So,
yeah, I'm just wondering how. I'm not familiar with. Okay, so this is a Citrix thing. I'm wondering if it's you could just ask them, "Hey, I bought this hardware. Can you update your Kubernetes thing?" Let's see. So I see how much.
That'd be a ticket to Citrix.
Yeah. I'm just wondering. I've not had to deal with on-prem stuff like this in a while, so let's like. So I'm looking at like the Helm charts and stuff.
Pretty sure they have a Slack too open for this kind of stuff. I remember they were at the last KubeCon, and
Okay.
I'll try to find that reference.
Yeah, that would be great. All right, Ibrahim, I hope that gets you going in the right direction. Let us know how that goes. It would be interesting to see, what things they add in order to get the features that they want. Varund Hall asks, I'm facing a problem with Kube Scheduler creating new pods for a one-time job. Here's the config for the job, and then you should see the YAML right here. And here are the audit logs, and then there's a link. Ideally, a new pod should be created once the initial pod is there, ? Have you looked at this?
I've looked at this, and we kind of need more information. The audit logs, just from skimming, don't actually show any glaring error. It looks like everything has the correct permissions. I might do something like a kubectl describe or kubectl events to try and see what Kubernetes is actually trying to do scheduling the pod, because again, audit logs from skimming seem like everything's just fine.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I can think of, just glancing at it, if your GCR repo, again, just looking at the job spec, if your GCR repo is a private repo and you don't have the credentials or registry secret set up, it's not going to be able to pull the pod, and the pod won't or pull the image and the pod won't schedule. So that's, please give us more info.
Yep, and we'll go ahead and give you some time to do that. So we are caught up on questions. Any more questions before we start to hit the backlog? As always, we try to prioritize the people who are watching. So if you have questions, if you're listening on the YouTube channel, you can join us on Slack, #office-hours on slack.kubernetes.io. Just follow the instructions down here. And you put in your email address, and then you get a cool little invite, and then you can join us on Slack. And let me check the discuss questions just in case. We are good there. All right, moving on. KVaz asks, how can I see a list of all pods within the same service from inside a pod? This feels very, what's that movie?
I need to read this.
This feels very Inception. Yeah, thank you. I was like, wait, what?
Could you have the pod hit the API server and return stuff if it has the right permissions, or would that be too much? Weird.
I've done some work in the sense of creating cron jobs that are able to do kubectl commands against the cluster running within the cluster. I'm not sure about the specific question about service, but definitely I needed to do, and I'm talking about IBM Cloud Kubernetes services. I needed to set up the correct RBAC rights, and of course have in the image kubectl installed, and the Docker, and kubectl comes with it. And then I was able to do kubectl commands like get pods, or even exec from within the container, within the pod, within the cluster. I don't know if that kind of answers.
So I was just looking at the Kubernetes download API. So what you can do is you can get the labels for a pod to be put in a file on the file system, and then you could do like theoretically some kubectl get using those labels, and that should in theory give you like a list of the pods that have got the same labels, which you would assume are then the same service, maybe.
I think no matter what, you're going to have to be querying the Kubernetes API to get that information.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments on this one? All right, Lucky G asks, is it possible to use mounted volume in Kubernetes ingress metadata.annotation? We have a long list of data that we need to add in the annotation field. Is it possible to add it? Thanks.
I don't think it is.
Okay.
With annotations and labels, you're not generally mounting things into that. You can only essentially mount those things into pods. One thing that you could do though would be to use something like meta controller or something else that sort of adds that information for you.
Okay. Any other comments on this one? This one should be a lot of fun. Nodgelos asks, what do you use for generic / templating configurations? Helm seems a bit complicated just for that, but I like to stick to customized, but I need to populate a few values in the configs.
My preference is go for it.
Everyone's stumped today.
No, so the problem is a lot of these questions are depends, and we would need to know more about their specific use case. If they want to populate a few values in the configs, I mean, realistically, Helm is a bit complicated, but for that use case, it's actually fairly simple. It seems like the community is moving slowly towards customize for these use cases, and they should be able to populate values in the configs using customize. It just depends on, again, their specific use case. I went first. Someone else go.
I'll bite. We were looking at doing something similar, like possibly a kind of a combination of Helm and Customize to just overcomplicate things using Helm templates and not to use full charts, and then using Customize to kind of drop in those common elements. So for dev prod QA, but use Helm for the variable merging, short of actually adding something to Customize that would actually use Go templating or something like that to merge in variables.
Okay.
That's my piece.
I think it depends what kind of stuff you're templating. So we did an experiment with like a mutating admission controller to template cluster-specific environment stuff. So like the cluster's name, the region it's in, all that kind of stuff. Because we found for a lot of our like monitoring and logging and that kind of stuff, that we wanted to have the cluster name in lots of different configs, like in the host names and the ingress and that kind of stuff. So you can have that if that's the kind of stuff you want to template, and your manifest like the only difference is this like cluster specific information. That's something you can do, although I'm leaning further and further away from that approach the more I see people abuse it.
I just had a thought. If you're going through a CI process, so something like GitLab, it gives you variables in there, so you can have your templating going through that and having them merged in and customized for some other stuff. Seems might be a little hacky, but it might work.
Okay. Any other comments on this one? So I'm picking this next one here because it sounds simple, but I just want to know what steps each of you do when something like this happens. So it seems simple here. Hi, y'all. I have my pods showing as half ready. How can I debug what's causing that? So you go, nothing fires up, and then they just sit there. Just kind of TLDRs, like the basic, where do I start? Where do I look logs? This kind of thing.
Normally I do kubectl describe, find out where it is, what pod's broken, and then check the logs on the broken container.
Mm-hmm. What do you usually, is a broken container usually the cause that you have? Assuming you have a well-running cluster to begin with, right?
Typically, when something like that happens, it's missing something. So it might be spinning, looking for a persistent volume mount that's not there, or a storage class that doesn't exist, or configuration that's wrong. So the sidecar will spin up A-OK, or it could be dependent on another container somewhere, so that it just kind of spins. It goes into a lovely boot loop or crashback loop.
Okay. Jeff, Bob, when you see failures, usually what is it?
Fat fingering. Someone types something wrong in like the definition of the image, so it's trying to pull. So the sidecar spins up just fine, but the image happens to be wrong, or the tag happens to be wrong, and the image doesn't exist, so it just fails.
We work in the same clusters.
Mm.
Our answers are going to be the same.
Yeah. Joel, what about you? What typical failure scenarios do you have on pods?
It's the same sort of stuff. Like broken config is quite a big one. For some reason, people don't seem to link their configs on our clusters, and then the pods are just sat there going, I don't know how to start, or yeah, it's all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Any other tips on failed pods? And we are down to our last 10 minutes. Next question comes from Ioanis. Sorry, I hope I get that name right. It says, assuming you have an operator managing multiple Kubernetes resources, e.g. stateful set deployment, what is the best practice to pull images from a private container registry given a Kubernetes secret? Propagate image pull secrets maybe? Question mark.
Full secret seems like a good way to do it. I haven't dealt with operators too much, so.
Mm-hmm. We should perhaps try to get an operator person hanging out. I think we've got more operators questions this week than usual.
So my only question in their case is, are they concerned about the private registries? Are they concerned about the private registries creds being cluster wide? Because aren't image pull secrets cluster wide? No.
No, they can be
For some-
namespace.
Oh, it is per namespace.
Just seeing if they're typing in more information.
And if the operator or whatever it is can't add those things because they're sort of self-managing, again, you could use something like either MetaController or like OPA to sort of intercept those requests and add that onto it. But the operator itself might not be happy with that. It just sort of depends on how they're managing things.
And then I will toss a link for OPA into the chat. I don't think we've had a session where we haven't mentioned OPA for something.
Yeah, it's definitely come up a lot lately.
Yep, and it looks like they were typing, so let's give them a second to type there. In the meantime, Jeff, you could probably start to get the raffle ready for the t-shirt. So as always, we like to give away a t-shirt during the session here. Actually, since we don't have a West Coast edition, we can give away 2 shirts, Jeff. Will that complicate things for you? For your guaranteed to be random. We could take 1 or 2 questions, audience, if you still have them. We would just give people here some time to chat. If you're joining us from YouTube or Kubernetes-users, welcome. We do this the 3rd Wednesday of every month, and it is on the Kubernetes community calendar. And you can always just subscribe to the YouTube channels, click the little bell warning thing, and you'll get a notification when we go live. So while we're waiting for people to type, real quick, KubeCon sessions you're looking forward to. I know Chris isn't going, but he'll go to San Diego, I hope. So
I'm still looking forward to hearing about the Netflix destroying all their clusters and surviving somehow.
Ooh, yes, that was a good one. That one looked good. What else are we looking forward to?
CERN's doing another recap again on their progress since last year.
Yep, and you and Jeff are visiting CERN in like a few days.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
We leave for the airport in 2 hours.
That's gonna be good. And Joel, what are you looking forward to session-wise?
Not really sure. I spent a long time yesterday looking through the schedule, and there's all sorts of stuff I want to go to. Lots of things, promising things that I didn't realize were possible, like vertically scaling your pods without restarting them.
Yeah.
I'm just scanning through now. Every session, I've got like 3 things ticked, and so I need to go through and whittle them down again.
Yeah.
Yeah, those of you listening, if this is your first KubeCon, you definitely want to get a calendar going. I even put the parties on the calendar. It's like, where do I need to be? So like, you really have to deconflict.
I really wish Sched would actually allow you to add like personal events or something like that.
Yes. So on there, we have more information. It says the JSON Docker config is saved inside a namespace Kate secret. The secret is referenced as image pull secret in operators SA. Should the operator create / mount individual secrets for STS deployment that might live in a different namespace?
Yeah, I think probably. So it sounds like they've got an operator that's creating stateful sets and daemon sets and deployments and stuff. So if they've got the image pull secret in their namespace, they're going to need to copy it into a secret in the other namespace and then reference it as an image pull secret. There's no way to do that across namespaces. What I would be tempted to do there is then add an owner reference to that secret that points to anything that is currently using it as an image pull secret, so that if they all get deleted, the secret will also get garbage collected. So don't randomly leave secrets flying around.
Yep. And then they do mention that they have an operator managing the stateful sets and deployments and stuff.
Yeah.
So
yeah, copy across namespaces, reference it using other references to deployments, and use the image pull secrets thing. It should work.
Yep. He says that's exactly his case. So cool. Any other comments on this one? All right, we're about to wrap it up because a bunch of us are getting on planes here to go to KubeCon. We will be at at least 4 or 5 of us will be at KubeCon, so come see us. I almost always have swag to give away. Those of you listening, always love to hear your feedback on how this could be more useful for you. And please pay it forward, let us know. This panel is volunteer only, so if you want to come hang out and just answer a bunch of questions, it's a great way to give back to the community. So we have 2 winners here for the t-shirts. Jeff, I see you PMing me, but I'm in window crazy mode. Can you just announce the winners for us, and then I will PM you afterwards?
Sure. So winner number 1 was Pavlazov. I don't envy people having to pronounce names. And the second winner was Robbie Blaine.
Ooh, sweet. So stick those in the chat there, so that they get PM, and then I will follow up with them to give the t-shirt. Okay, with that, any other comments, questions, or anything, panel? Last chance. All right, and as we said earlier, there will be no afternoon session. I know that the calendar says there's an afternoon session, and I will work with the CNCF to try to fix the calendar. And we will see everybody. We're going to KubeCon, and then we'll see everybody next month in June for our next office hours, always the 3rd Wednesday of every month. And with that, thank you, everyone.